Years have passed since he left office, yet Barack Obama still holds a rare kind of influence, the kind that speaks softly but changes everything. And this night proved it again. The night sky over Washington shimmered with a quiet sense of anticipation. The city that had seen endless political battles was about to witness another one, not in the shadows of Congress, not in the chaos of Twitter, but on a single stage, in front of the entire world. It was the evening of the National Leadership Forum, an event that only happened once every decade. A rare occasion where past and present presidents shared the same platform, to speak, to reflect, and to show the nation that even in disagreement, democracy stood tall. Inside the grand hall, the lights glowed softly, bouncing off golden drapes and polished marble floors. Rows of dignitaries filled the seats, senators, military leaders, ambassadors, and influential figures from around the world. The air was thick with whispers, camera clicks, and the quiet hum of expectation. Everyone knew this was more than an event. It was a face-off in disguise. At one side of the hall sat Barack Obama, calm and composed as ever. His signature smile flickered as he greeted familiar faces. He looked rested, confident, and at peace, like a man who had made peace with history. Across from him sat Donald Trump, the current president. His posture was firm, his gaze unwavering. He adjusted his red tie, looked around the room, and nodded occasionally, but his mind was elsewhere. He was ready to reclaim the spotlight, to remind the crowd that he was in charge now. Every conversation in that hall led back to one question. What would happen when these two men spoke, back to back? Trump's supporters whispered that Obama would be put in his place. Obama's admirers believed Trump would lose his composure. No one could predict which way the night would go, and that was exactly why everyone's eyes stayed glued to the stage. The moderator, a respected figure known for keeping peace in even the most heated debates, stepped up to the podium and announced, "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we gather to discuss the challenges facing our nation and the path forward. Please welcome our first speaker, former President Barack Obama." The applause erupted like thunder. Obama stood, buttoned his jacket, and walked to the stage with quiet grace. Cameras flashed. A dozen microphones pointed toward him. Yet somehow, amid the noise, his presence brought calm. He began with a small smile. "Good evening. It's good to be home." The room softened instantly. Even those who disagreed with him leaned in to listen. His tone carried warmth, but also the weight of wisdom, like someone who had seen both triumph and chaos and learned from both. He spoke of the struggles the country faced, economic divisions, rising distrust, the need for compassion and leadership. America's strength, he said, has never been about one man. It's always been about all of us working together. His words flowed like music, balanced, clear, and confident. People nodded, clapped, even smiled. For 10 minutes, it didn't feel like politics. It felt like a reminder that hope still had a voice. But in the front row, Trump watched carefully. His eyes narrowed slightly each time Obama mentioned unity, progress, or cooperation. He shifted in his seat. To most people, Obama's words sounded like wisdom. To Trump, they sounded like challenge. When Obama spoke of achievements from his administration, from expanding healthcare to strengthening international ties, a faint tension crept into the air. Trump's expression hardened. He leaned toward one of his aides and muttered something under his breath. Cameras caught the movement, but not the words. Obama concluded his speech with a simple but powerful line. "Leadership is not about tearing others down to look taller. It's about lifting people so the country stands stronger." The audience rose to their feet. The applause was long and loud. Obama smiled, nodded, and returned to his seat. Trump clapped politely, twice more, and then stopped. His lips curved into a faint grin, the kind that hid more than it revealed. The moderator stepped forward again. "Thank you, President Obama. Now please welcome the current President of the United States, Donald J. Trump." Instantly, the energy shifted. The applause was polite but thinner, unsure. Trump stood, straightened his tie once more, and walked to the podium with a confident stride. His shoes echoed sharply against the stage floor. As he looked across the hall, his expression changed. The charm in his face turned cold. His gaze moved toward Obama's table and then lingered. He smiled, but it wasn't the friendly kind. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment. "Thank you," he began, his voice steady and strong. That was quite a speech. A ripple of nervous laughter passed through the crowd. Trump looked down for a second, then back up. "We all love to hear nice stories," he said. "But let's be honest, some people talk about unity after leaving a mess behind. I've spent years cleaning up what others called progress." The tension rose instantly. Cameras zoomed in. Obama didn't move, but his jaw tightened ever so slightly. Trump continued, his words laced with sarcasm and pride. "They say leaders come and go. That's true, but some should have gone a lot sooner." The audience gasped, and just like that, the night that was meant to be about leadership, unity, and vision turned into something else entirely. It had become a battle of legacies, and everyone in that room could feel that the real fight had only just begun. As Barack Obama reached the podium, the noise in the hall slowly faded. Conversations hushed, camera shutters stilled, and even the air seemed to pause. There was something about his presence. It carried quiet authority, the kind that didn't demand attention but earned it naturally. He adjusted the microphone and smiled lightly. "Good evening," he began. His tone was warm, sincere, and steady, the kind of voice that could fill a room without raising its volume. "It's an honor to stand here tonight with all of you, to talk about the challenges we face, and the hope that still drives this great nation forward." A few polite claps followed, and then silence returned. Everyone leaned in a little closer. Obama wasn't performing. He was connecting. He started by painting a picture of the country he once led. Not perfect, not free of mistakes, but one that had always pushed through its struggles with courage and unity. "When I walked into the White House," he said softly, "the economy was falling apart. Families were losing their homes, their jobs, their faith. But Americans didn't give up. We rolled up our sleeves and together we rebuilt." He paused, letting the words breathe. "And we did rebuild. We created millions of jobs. We reformed a healthcare system that left too many behind. We made sure that if you got sick, you didn't have to choose between medicine and rent." There was gentle applause. People remembered those years, the struggle, the progress, the feeling that change was possible. Obama smiled faintly, almost as if remembering the weight of it himself. "It wasn't easy," he continued, "and it sure wasn't perfect. But we did it together, Democrats, Republicans, Independents, because when Americans work as one, there's nothing we can't fix." His words carried rhythm, almost poetic, but grounded in truth. You could sense the crowd's pulse slowing, their faces softening. He had a way of making politics sound like purpose. Then he shifted his focus to something deeper, the spirit of leadership itself. "Leadership," he said, "isn't about claiming credit. It's not about shouting the loudest or blaming the most. It's about listening, even when it's hard. It's about lifting others up, even when you could stand taller by pushing them down." The audience clapped again, louder this time. His message struck a nerve. Sitting a few feet away, Trump didn't move. He crossed his arms and tilted his head slightly as if measuring every word. Obama went on, completely composed. "I've learned that progress isn't destroyed overnight. You can rewrite policies, you can change laws, but you can't erase the truth of what people lived through. You can't erase hope once it's been felt." The line hung in the air like a soft echo. It wasn't said in anger. It was said with quiet certainty, and that made it hit even harder. He spoke about America's identity, how it wasn't built on wealth or power alone, but on compassion and respect. "Our greatness," he said, "is not in the size of our towers, but in the strength of our hearts. It's not in how loud we speak, but in how well we listen to one another." Somewhere in the crowd, someone whispered, "That's the Obama we remember." He smiled again, as if sensing it. "I believe in an America," he continued, "where truth still matters, where kindness is not weakness, and where no leader, no matter how powerful, stands above the people he serves." The applause that followed was steady, rising slowly like a wave. People were moved, not just by his words, but by the calm authority behind them. But as the sound filled the hall, Trump's face stiffened. His fingers tapped lightly on the table. Each mention of unity, truth, or compassion seemed to irritate him more. Obama, unaware or perhaps unconcerned, continued. "The measure of a president," he said, "isn't how many enemies he makes, but how many bridges he builds." Because anger might win applause for a moment, But unity wins history. For the first time, Trump's eyes narrowed. The faint smile that had rested on his face began to fade. Obama looked across the hall, not directly at Trump, but close enough that everyone felt the tension spark. "If we truly love this country," he said, "then we fight for every American, not just the ones who praise us. We lead not by fear, but by faith." The crowd erupted once more. The applause was no longer polite. It was passionate. Obama nodded in appreciation, then took a breath and finished with a quiet final line. "Leaders come and go, but what they leave behind, that's what lasts. Let's make sure what we leave is worth remembering." The hall stood up in applause. Some clapped out of respect, others out of admiration. Even those who disagreed with him couldn't deny the composure and grace with which he spoke. And yet, in the midst of the noise, there was one pair of hands that didn't join in. Trump sat still, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the stage. The polite grin he had worn before was gone. What remained was something sharper, a look of challenge. Because in that moment he knew what everyone else did too. Obama hadn't just spoken about leadership. He had spoken to him, and soon Trump would make sure the calm wouldn't last. As the echoes of applause for Obama slowly faded, a hush spread across the hall. The crowd shifted in their seats, still processing the calm power of the former president's words. But in that quiet, one man's expression remained unsoftened. Donald Trump sat still, eyes fixed on the podium, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. When the moderator announced his name, the applause that followed was polite, measured. Trump stood, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked to the microphone with heavy confidence. He didn't glance toward Obama as he passed. He didn't need to. The tension between them already filled the air like static before a storm. "Thank you," Trump began, his tone steady but sharp. "That was quite a speech. Very elegant, very emotional. Almost sounded like a farewell tour." A few laughs came from his corner of the audience. Quick, nervous bursts that died as soon as they began. Trump's eyes scanned the crowd, catching the unease and feeding off it. "I have to say," he continued, "I've heard a lot of nice words about unity tonight. Beautiful words. But I live in the real world. And in the real world, unity doesn't fix broken borders. It doesn't stop inflation. It doesn't clean up the disasters we inherited." The word inherited landed like a dart. Everyone knew what he meant. Obama remained still, his face calm, but the room could feel Trump pushing harder, testing the boundaries. Trump straightened his shoulders. "People forget," he said, "the mess we were left with. They forget how the last guy's policies drained our strength. They forget who said we'd lead from behind. I call that weakness." A few gasps fluttered through the crowd. Trump's tone was turning colder. He wasn't looking for common ground, and he was drawing a line. Trump paused, then leaned closer to the microphone, lowering his voice just enough to sound personal. "You know, some people talk a lot about American values, but maybe they should start by proving they're fully American themselves." The audience froze. The air thickened instantly. It wasn't subtle. It was a direct jab at Obama's background, a revival of an old, cruel whisper that had followed him for years. Trump smiled faintly, almost pleased by the silence that followed. "I'm just saying," he added, "we should all be honest about who we are and where we come from." For a brief moment, the entire hall seemed to hold its breath. Obama's eyes lifted toward Trump, expression unreadable. No anger, no visible reaction, just quiet, measured control. And that silence spoke louder than anything else in the room. Trump noticed it, and his voice grew louder. "You see, I don't believe in fake promises or fake smiles," he said. "We've had enough of that. America needs action. America needs real leadership, and that's what we're doing now." The word fake repeated again, deliberately, cruelly. He wasn't just addressing the audience anymore. He was targeting Obama directly, trying to provoke him, trying to drag him into open conflict. A few of Trump's supporters in the front rows nodded. Some even clapped, uncertain whether it was the right moment to do so. The rest of the hall stayed still, uncomfortable and quiet. Trump continued, pacing slightly behind the podium. "It's funny," he said. "Some people act like they built the country from scratch. But when I took over, it was falling apart. The world laughed at us. We were weak, disrespected, and tied up in bad deals. I fixed that. I brought jobs back, I rebuilt our military. I made America proud again. His voice rose with each sentence, more forceful, more defensive, as if he were arguing not with the audience, but with something inside himself. Some people like to talk about character, Trump said, his tone turning mocking now. They stand here and talk about kindness and listening. That's great for storybooks, but the world isn't kind. The world listens to strength, and I am strength. That last line echoed through the hall heavy and sharp. He stopped, letting the silence stretch. Then, without turning, he glanced sideways toward Obama's seat and said quietly, "You know, some people leave office, but they never really leave. They hang around. They can't let go." The audience shifted again, uneasy. Everyone knew this was no longer a political speech. It was personal. Trump smiled again, a thin, cutting smile. "They say leaders come and go," he said, echoing Obama's earlier words. "Well, some leaders go, and some of us stay long enough to clean up after them." The remark earned scattered claps, hesitant, uneasy. He ended with one last jab, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "I think it's great that we can have all former presidents here tonight. It's always nice to have a reminder of how far we've come and how much better things are now." With that, he stepped back from the microphone, straightened his jacket, and gave a short, self-satisfied nod. The hall remained silent for a long moment. No applause. Just a murmur of discomfort, tension, and disbelief. Trump turned, made his way back to his seat, and flashed a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Obama looked straight ahead, still composed, still quiet. But something in his stillness had changed. A kind of sharpened calm. The calm before the strike. Trump sat down, clearly pleased with himself, convinced he had made his point. But what he didn't realize, what no one in that room yet knew, was that Obama wasn't finished. The real response was still coming, and when it did, it would leave the room in stunned silence. For a few long seconds after Trump sat down, the room remained frozen. No one clapped. No one moved. It was as if the air itself had thickened, trapping everyone between disbelief and discomfort. The contrast between Obama's calm composure and Trump's cutting tone still lingered like smoke after a fire. Obama sat quietly, his expression thoughtful. He wasn't angry, not yet, but something in his eyes shifted. He had faced louder critics, tougher nights, harsher headlines. But this wasn't politics anymore. It was personal. The moderator hesitated, sensing the tension. "Thank you, Mr. President," he said weakly. Before he could continue, Obama rose slowly from his chair. The movement was quiet but commanding. Every head turned. The murmurs stopped. He didn't wait for permission to speak. He didn't need it. He walked back to the microphone with steady steps. Trump glanced at him, eyebrows raised as if daring him to say something. Obama reached the podium and paused. His voice, when it came, was low and deliberate. "You know," he began, "I've been told many things in my life. That I wasn't born here, that I didn't belong, that my success was somehow borrowed." The crowd fell silent. His tone wasn't defensive. When it was measured, almost surgical. He continued, "But tonight I'm reminded that sometimes the loudest voices are the most afraid. Afraid of losing control. Afraid of being seen for who they really are." Trump leaned back in his chair, pretending to look amused, but his smile had tightened. Obama's gaze turned toward him. Calm, steady, cutting through the tension like a laser. "You talk about truth," he said. "Let's talk about that for a second. You've questioned my life, my background, my faith, even my birthplace." A murmur rippled through the audience. Obama tilted his head slightly. "So let me ask you a question, Donald. You and Ivanka secretly have children?" The room erupted into shocked whispers. The moderator's eyes widened. Trump froze for a split second, his expression flickering between confusion and outrage. Obama didn't raise his voice, because when you question someone's identity, you should be ready to have your own question too. The hall had never been so quiet. You could almost hear the sound of someone's pen falling to the floor. Trump tried to laugh it off, but his voice cracked slightly. "Ridiculous," he said. "Completely false. You're losing it, Barack." Obama simply nodded, unfazed. "Oh, I'm sure," he replied softly. "But sometimes jokes reveal more truth than lies ever could. I seem to recall a few comments you made about your daughter, ones that didn't sound like jokes at all." The audience gasped. Several faces turned toward Trump. Obama didn't smile. "You mocked me for years. You insulted my name, my family, even my country. But here's the difference between us, Donald. I never had to tear someone else down to feel tall. There was silence again. A heavy, meaningful silence. Trump shifted in his seat, his face reddening. "Watch yourself," he muttered, but the microphone caught it. Obama's tone remained calm, almost gentle. "You see, the problem with lies is they always come back. You can try to erase someone's story, but truth has a way of finding the light." The room was split now, but half in awe, half in disbelief. Obama's words were sharp, but his delivery made them sting more. He wasn't shouting. He was exposing. Trump tried to interrupt, but Obama continued before he could. "It's interesting," he said, looking straight at him. "You speak about family values, yet the world remembers what you said about your own daughter. That's not leadership, Donald. That's confusion." Trump's jaw clenched. He stood up halfway as if about to respond, but something, pride, fear, anger, where it kept him seated. Obama's eyes didn't leave him. "You want to talk about America's truth? Let's start with yours. You built your empire on controversy and attention, but attention fades. Truth doesn't." Then, as if sealing his point, he added quietly, "And you might want to be careful, because not everyone in this room believes Jared Kushner is the only one who knows the full story." A visible shiver passed through the crowd. Some gasped. Others exchanged confused glances. Trump's composure cracked completely. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Obama leaned slightly toward the microphone. "I'll stop there," he said calmly. "Because unlike you, I don't enjoy humiliation, even when it's earned." He stepped back. The hall remained dead still. No applause, no laughter, just shock. Trump stood abruptly, knocking his chair back. "Enough," he snapped. "This is unacceptable. Either he leaves this stage or I walk out of this farce." The organizer hurried over, whispering to both men, but the damage was already done. Obama said nothing more. He simply nodded, turned, and began to walk away, his stride unbroken. Trump watched him go, breathing heavily, eyes darting between the crowd and the exit. The audience remained in stunned silence. Everyone knew they had just witnessed something far bigger than a political clash. It was a collision between composure and chaos, between calm truth and reckless pride. And as Obama's figure disappeared beyond the curtain, one question hung in the air like smoke after a storm. What exactly did Obama know, and why did it make Trump so afraid? The moment Obama left the stage, the atmosphere inside the grand hall shifted completely. The applause that usually followed any former president's speech never came. The audience sat frozen, faces turned toward Trump, who still stood near his chair, red-faced and tense. The echo of Obama's last words lingered in the air like an invisible storm cloud. Trump's breathing was uneven. His usual confident smirk had vanished, replaced by a look that flickered between anger and something deeper: unease. The question Obama had asked wasn't just bold, it was dangerous. And the way Obama had said it, calm and certain, made it sound like he knew something real. Trump turned toward the organizer, his voice tight. "You need to remove him now. I won't stay here while someone slanders me in front of the world." The organizer, a nervous man in a black suit, stammered, "Mr. President, he's already left. Please, let's just continue with the schedule." "Continue," Trump interrupted, his voice sharp enough to cut glass. "You think we can continue after that?" The room went silent again. Cameras, once steady, trembled slightly in their operators' hands. The guests looked around, unsure whether to leave or to wait. No one dared speak. Trump's hand clenched on the edge of the table. He could feel eyes on him, not with admiration this time, but curiosity. Suspicion. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was personal. Obama's question had planted a seed that no denial could easily uproot. Finally, he spoke again, louder this time. "This is what happens when you give a failed leader a microphone: lies, attacks, pure disrespect." He pointed toward the exit where Obama had disappeared. "He thinks he can talk to me like that? He thinks he can question me in public?" The anger in his voice trembled, not from strength but from panic. It was rare to see Trump rattled, but the audience could sense it. Something inside him had cracked. A woman in the front row whispered to her companion, "Why didn't he just laugh it off?" Another replied quietly, "Because maybe it's not a lie." That whisper spread like a spark through the crowd. Small, soft, dangerous. Trump noticed the murmurs. He turned toward the audience, forcing a smile that looked strained. "You all know me," he said quickly. "You know the truth. I've always told it straight, always," but even as he said it, his voice wavered. His usual rhythm, confident booming, was gone. The power of Obama's calm had stripped away his armor. Someone shouted from the back, "Then why not answer his question?" Trump froze. His mouth opened, but no words came. For a moment he looked lost. Not the man used to commanding attention, but someone cornered by shadows of his own making. He finally muttered, "Ridiculous. Not worth responding to," but his hands gave him away. They trembled slightly as he reached for a glass of water. He took a sip, then set it down too fast. The glass clinked loudly against the table. The organizer approached him again, speaking in a low, urgent voice. "Sir, maybe we should close the event early." Trump glared. "No, we're not ending it like this. He doesn't get the last word. Not him." He turned back to the microphone, forcing his tone back to strength. "Let me tell you something," he began. "Some people think they're clever. They hide behind fancy words and fake smiles. But America knows who's real. America knows who's honest," but the energy had changed. The words didn't land. The crowd wasn't cheering. They were watching, evaluating. Obama's calm presence had left a shadow that Trump couldn't shake off. He went on, talking faster, louder, almost desperate to fill the silence. "These people, they want to tear me down because they can't stand success. They can't stand that I'm still here, stronger than ever." A few claps echoed weakly, but they died quickly. Trump's eyes darted toward the side doors where staff members whispered nervously. He could see cameras still rolling. Every twitch, every flicker of emotion was being captured. "End it," he muttered to his aide. "Now." But as he turned to leave, something stopped him. A voice, soft but clear, came from somewhere in the middle rows. "Maybe Obama didn't need to tear you down," the voice said. "You just did it yourself." It was a single sentence, but it hit harder than anything else that night. The room fell utterly silent again. Trump froze for a heartbeat, then walked away, his steps heavy and uneven. Behind him, the whispers grew again, cautious, electrified, unstoppable. Did you hear what he said? What if Obama was right? Why did Trump look so nervous? By the time Trump reached the exit, the tension in the hall had become unbearable. The once celebratory event now felt like a courtroom. He stopped for a moment at the door, turned back as if to say something, then didn't. He simply walked out, leaving the echo of his silence behind. And in that silence, Obama's question still lingered, louder than any speech given that night. It wasn't just about politics anymore. It was about truth and the fear of it. And deep down, every person in that hall knew one thing for certain. Trump wasn't shaken because he'd been insulted. He was shaken because for the first time in a long time, someone had made him feel exposed. The chaos in the hall didn't fade quickly. Even after Trump stormed out, the whispers refused to stop. The audience didn't know whether to leave, stay seated, or wait for someone to explain what had just happened. The atmosphere was thick, part confusion, part disbelief, and part fear that something irreversible had just unfolded. The organizer, Michael, stood near the stage, watching it all with a heavy heart. He was the one who had spent months arranging this event, calling it a celebration of leadership. It was supposed to be historic, a moment where two presidents, past and present, shared ideas about the nation's future. Instead, it had turned into a public collision between pride and truth. Michael's phone buzzed nonstop. Advisors, journalists, and staff members were demanding updates all at once. But he ignored them. His focus was on one thing: controlling the damage before it spun out of control. Trump had disappeared into the private corridor behind the stage. Obama, on the other hand, had already left the hall entirely, his exit calm, deliberate, and unhurried. The contrast between the two exits said more than any speech could. Michael finally took a deep breath and walked toward the side door, where Trump's security team stood guard. Inside the private lounge, Trump was pacing furiously, his face flushed. "He doesn't get away with this," Trump was saying. "Not after what he said. I want him banned from every event tied to this organization. You hear me?" Michael nodded cautiously. "Understood, Mr. President, but right now the media outside is asking questions. They want to know what happened and why you left so suddenly. We need to manage the optics." "Optics?" Trump snapped. "You think I care about optics when someone publicly accuses me of that filth?" Michael's hands tightened around his clipboard, but he stayed calm. With respect, sir, what matters now is the response. If you show anger, people will think he touched a nerve. If you stay calm, they'll move on. Trump stopped pacing, glaring at him. You think I look rattled? Michael didn't answer right away. The silence itself said enough. Outside the room, the audience had started to leave in small groups, still whispering. Some looked uneasy, others intrigued. But everyone carried the same question in their minds. What did Obama mean by that? Michael left the lounge quietly and walked toward the main exit, where Obama's car had just pulled away minutes earlier. A few of Obama's staff members were still there, gathering documents. Michael approached one of them, a young woman with a calm face and a knowing look. Did he plan that? Michael asked softly. That question, it wasn't part of his speech. She smiled faintly. President Obama doesn't speak unless he's sure of his words. The answer didn't calm him. It made him even more uneasy. He turned back to the hall, where cleanup crews had started stacking chairs. The once celebratory banners that read "A Night for Unity" now looked ironic. Nothing about the night had been unifying. It had exposed something raw, something everyone could feel but no one wanted to name. Michael gathered his courage and returned to the stage, where a few microphones still stood. He adjusted one and cleared his throat. The remaining guests, mostly reporters and staff, looked up. I want to thank everyone for attending tonight, he began, his voice steady but tired. We understand emotions ran high. Our goal was to bring together different perspectives, and sometimes that means difficult conversations happen. It was a diplomatic way of saying, we lost control. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. President Obama has left peacefully, and President Trump has stepped away for the evening. We appreciate your understanding. Someone in the crowd called out, Is it true what Obama said? Michael froze for a fraction of a second before answering. Tonight's focus was on leadership, not rumors. What matters is how we move forward. But even as he said it, he knew it wasn't true. The only thing anyone cared about now was the rumor. Obama's words had cut deep into something that couldn't easily be ignored. After the statement, Michael walked off the stage, feeling the weight of the night pressing down on him. In his mind, the image replayed, Obama's calm face, Trump's fury, the question that had silenced an entire hall. Outside, the air was cool. Reporters were already gathering by the entrance, lights flashing, microphones ready. They didn't even need statements. They had a story already, one that would spread like wildfire without needing confirmation. Michael stood under the archway, watching the cars disappear into the distance. One carried Trump hidden behind tinted glass. The other, Obama, serene, steady, untouchable. It struck him that two men had walked into that hall as symbols of power, but only one had walked out with control. As the last of the guests left, Michael looked back at the now empty hall. The stage lights had dimmed, but in his mind, Obama's last words still echoed clearly. You can try to erase someone's story, but truth has a way of finding the light. He didn't know what truth Obama had hinted at, or whether Trump feared its return, but one thing was certain. Whatever it was, it had unsettled the most confident man in the room. And for the first time that evening, Michael realized this event wouldn't just fade away. It had opened a door, and behind that door, something dangerous and deeply human waited to come out. By the time the hall emptied, night had fully settled over the city. The streets outside glimmered under soft yellow lights, and the echoes of what had happened inside still seemed to hum in the air. People didn't walk away from that event the same, not the guests, not the staff, not even those who had only come to listen. Everyone carried something home with them, confusion, curiosity, or a quiet sense that they had witnessed history twist in real time. Hours later, the story had already spread in whispers and half-truths. Some said Obama's question had been pure strategy, a calculated strike. Others believed it was something deeper, something only he and Trump truly understood. But no matter how people tried to explain it, one thing stayed clear. The calm man had shaken the loud one without ever raising his voice. In homes across the country, people replayed the event in their minds. Some admired Obama's restraint, the way he stayed composed even when provoked. Others wondered what had driven Trump to lose control so easily. It wasn't just politics anymore, it was human. Two men, Two worlds colliding in front of everyone, exposing not just power but pride. Somewhere, a young student who had never cared about politics watched the replay online. She didn't understand every policy or every argument, but she understood tone. She noticed how Obama's steady words carried more strength than any insult could. And for the first time, she realized that leadership wasn't about volume. It was about presence. Others watched too. Parents, workers, veterans, each drawing their own lessons. Some saw a reminder that truth, even when spoken quietly, carries a weight no anger can erase. Others saw it as a warning that pride, when left unchecked, can make even the strongest look small. The night had ended, but the questions it raised refused to fade. What was Trump trying so hard to hide? Why did Obama choose that moment to strike? And perhaps most hauntingly, what happens when truth becomes too heavy for power to carry? No one knew the full answers, but everyone felt the same unease. The hall where it happened would be cleaned by morning, the lights turned off, the chairs packed away, yet something intangible would remain. The silence that followed Obama's last words would echo far longer than the applause ever could. Leadership, people realized, isn't measured by who stands tallest at a podium. It's seen in who stays calm when the room catches fire. It's shown in the ability to face insult without surrendering to rage. And as the night slipped into memory, those who had been there would remember not just what was said, but how it felt. The tension, the stillness, the strange mix of fear and respect that filled the air. Because sometimes, a single question can do what hours of speeches never could, reveal who truly holds control. And that night, it wasn't the man shouting who held it. It was the one who walked away quietly, leaving behind a silence that said everything.